Vanessa Whitlow didn't expect her Tuesday night to start with a man bleeding on the floor of the clinic's waiting room, and definitely not a man wearing what looked like a designer suit under a blood-stained jacket. She rushed to his side, her chest tightening as she pressed gauze to the gash on his arm. "You're lucky this place is still open." The man looked up at her with hazel eyes, pain etched in his jawline, but something about his gaze sharp alert. "Didn't feel lucky until now." "Flattering," she muttered, focused on the wound. "But you're still bleeding. What happened?" "Glass," he said, wincing. "Car window. I was trying to avoid a truck that ran a red light. You should have gone to the ER. Didn't want the press crawling all over it." She paused, narrowing her eyes. "Wait, are you?" "I'm Colin Dempsey," he said flatly, like he hated saying it. "I run Dempsey Holdings." Her hands froze. That name was everywhere: real estate, tech, even entertainment. Colin Dempsey was one of those billionaires who barely showed his face in public but somehow owned half of Manhattan. "You're that Colin Dempsey, unfortunately," he muttered. "Can you keep that to yourself?" Vanessa blinked at him. She didn't usually treat people worth billions of dollars. She was just covering the late shift because Dr. Patel's wife had gone into labor. "Well, I won't start a fan club or anything," she said, grabbing more gauze. "Hold still," he grunted. "You're not freaking out. You're just a guy with a busted arm right now." Colin let out a breath, almost like he didn't expect that. "You've got a good bedside manner." "Thanks, try not to pass out." He didn't. In fact, he stayed painfully conscious as she cleaned the wound and stitched it carefully, efficiently. He barely flinched. "You've done this before," he said, voice low. "Med school does that to you." After she bandaged his arm, she helped him sit up, and he looked at her again, slower this time. "What's your name?" Vanessa Whitlow." "Vanessa," he repeated, like he was testing the weight of it. "You always do late shifts like this?" "No, just covering tonight." "Why?" He held her gaze. "Because I think it just changed my entire week." Vanessa blinked. "You hit your head on the way in too," he laughed, and it was warm, surprisingly real. "No, but I've had a hell of a month, and this is the first time I've felt normal in a while." She crossed her arms. "You think getting stitched up in a half-empty clinic is normal?" Colin glanced around the room: cracked vinyl chairs, flickering overhead lights, and a fish tank missing half its fish, then looked back at her. "It is when you're here." There was something so unexpectedly sincere in the way he said it that it shut her up. He stood slowly, testing his weight. "You saved my arm. I just kept you from bleeding out." "Same thing." He reached into his coat, pulled out a black card, and held it out. She shook her head. "Nope, not taking your money." "It's not for money, it's my direct number, in case you ever need anything. I'm not calling a billionaire for a favor." Colin just smiled. "Then call if you ever want dinner." Vanessa stared at him, unsure if he was joking. He wasn't. He stepped toward the door but paused. "Thank you, Vanessa." She watched him walk out, his figure disappearing into the dark night, his driver waiting at the curb with a sleek black car that looked like it cost more than her apartment. The door clicked shut behind him. She shook her head and muttered, "What the hell just happened?" The next morning she told herself it was just a weird night, a rich man with a cut, nothing more. But then 3 days later, someone sent a bouquet of white orchids to the clinic. There was no card, just her name on the envelope. Vanessa opened it slowly. "I owe you dinner." "CD." She stared at the note, then at the sleek black town car parked across the street, like it had been waiting. "Are you serious?" she whispered. The driver stepped out of the car and opened the back door. Vanessa looked around. "Is this a prank?" The driver didn't say anything. She hesitated. Just for a second, then she walked to the car and slid into the back seat. Colin was waiting inside, wearing a navy suit and no tie, his bandaged arm resting on the seat beside him. "Hi," he said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. "You sent flowers to my work." "I did." "And a car. Also true. This is crazy." Colin leaned slightly toward her. "Tell me you don't want to be here and I'll take you home." She didn't say anything. He smiled. "Thought so?" Dinner was on a rooftop, not some tacky rooftop with plastic chairs and fairy lights. This was a private garden above a skyscraper with real candles, white tablecloths, and a view of the entire city. She stared at the skyline, then at Colin. "This isn't a restaurant, it's mine," he said simply. I bought the building last year. You bought a building to have dinner, he looked at her. I bought the building for a tech company, but I kept the roof. Vanessa sat back in her chair, folding her arms. You're something else, Colin grinned. You're not impressed. I'm not sure if I should be impressed or worried. He laughed again, the sound rough and honest. Over dinner they talked, really talked, about how she'd grown up in Queens, her mom a nurse, her dad a mechanic. How med school nearly crushed her, but she'd clawed her way through, and Colin told her about growing up in Connecticut, his father dying young and being thrown into a world of suits and investors before he even knew who he was. I hate most of it, he admitted. Everyone wants something. No one's real. Vanessa looked at him. I'm real, I know. They stared at each other for a second too long. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. I'm not usually like this, he said quietly. Neither am I. But neither of them pulled away. And when the driver dropped her off at her apartment later that night, Colin didn't try to kiss her. He just looked at her and said, I'm going to see you again. She didn't argue, she just nodded, because something about that night and that man had already started to change everything. The second time Vanessa saw Colin, he was waiting outside her apartment building just after her shift ended, leaning against a sleek obsidian coupe, with the kind of casual confidence that made people glance twice before pretending they hadn't. This time, there were no injuries. No bleeding or stitched-up arms, just a man in a tailored charcoal coat who looked like he hadn't slept much, but still managed to make it look deliberate. I thought billionaires didn't do stakeouts, Vanessa said, adjusting her scarf as she approached him. I don't, Colin replied, pushing off the car, but I made an exception. She raised a brow. For you, he said simply. Also, I needed a reason to not be in another boardroom today. You drove to Queens for that. I had a driver, he corrected, then paused. But yes. Vanessa glanced past him at the car, then back. And what exactly are you hoping to find here? Colin stepped closer, his tone low but direct. Something real. Something I don't have to negotiate or sign off on. Can I take you somewhere? She looked at him for a long moment, searching for the smallest trace of insincerity. There wasn't any. I have exactly one clean outfit and an appetite for something that doesn't come from a vending machine. Perfect, he said. I know a place. She expected a Michelin-starred restaurant or some hush-hush private club. Instead, they ended up in a tiny bistro tucked behind a florist's shop. The lights were warm, the tables mismatched, and the scent of roasted garlic drifted from the kitchen as though it had been simmering for hours. The hostess gave Colin a nod of recognition but didn't fawn, which surprised Vanessa until she realized there were no phones, no cameras, and no menus. Just a man with too much money and a chef who clearly didn't care. You brought me to a restaurant without menus, she asked as they were seated. I trust the chef, Colin said, shrugging out of his coat. He used to cook for my family before everything got complicated. Vanessa tilted her head. Complicated how? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at the candle between them, fingers tapping once against the table. My father's estate was contested, he said finally. A few relatives thought I shouldn't be in charge of the company. They tried to tear it apart in court. It got ugly. You were what, barely out of college back then, 23, he replied, and suddenly responsible for 10,000 employees. I didn't have time to grieve. Vanessa leaned forward slightly, her voice softer. And now I pretend I did. The food arrived without ceremony, fresh pasta, crusty bread, and something dark and rich in a tiny bowl that made Vanessa's eyes water when she tasted it. This is incredible, she muttered, reaching for her wine. What is this? Duck ragu with black truffle, Colin said. I told him to make what he used to on Sundays. Vanessa took another bite, then looked at him. You're doing it again. What? Trying to impress without looking like you're trying, Colin met her eyes. Is it working? She hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, unfortunately. They talked through dinner about small things this time. His taste in terrible action movies, explosions should have their own Oscar category, he insisted. Her obsession with crossword puzzles, how he'd once tried to make pancakes and ended up setting off the building's fire suppression system. By the time they stepped back into the night, the air had cooled and the street was mostly empty. Vanessa crossed her arms, glancing up at him. "You know this is moving fast, right? You mean us?" Colin asked. She nodded. "I don't usually do this." He nodded once. "Neither do I. But I don't want to stop." They stood there in the quiet for a beat too long. Then Colin reached into his coat and pulled out a small, flat box. He didn't open it, just held it out. "What is this?" Vanessa asked warily. "Not jewelry," he said. "It's a key," she blinked. "To what?" "To a building I own in the East Village. I'm converting it into a non-profit medical clinic, but it needs someone to run it, someone who doesn't quit when things get hard." Vanessa stared at him. "You don't even know if I'd want that." "You haven't said no yet." She held the box, stunned. "Why me?" "Because you didn't treat me like a headline," he said. "Because when I told you who I was, you didn't flinch. And because I've watched you for exactly 2 evenings and you already make more sense than anyone I've known in years." Vanessa exhaled. "This isn't how people offer jobs." "I'm not people," he said. "I'm offering you a chance to run something that matters. No red tape, no board approvals. Just medicine, just you." She looked down at the box. "You don't need to decide now," Colin added, "but I'm not asking because I want to buy your time. I'm asking because I want you close, and I think you want that too." Vanessa didn't answer, not yet. He stepped back toward the car, pausing before the door. "Do you want a ride?" She looked up. "I think I need a walk," he nodded. "Then I'll see you soon." This time she watched him leave. And when she finally opened the box in her hands, the key inside glittered under the streetlight, simple, silver, and real. Vanessa stepped into the East Village building for the first time on a damp Thursday morning. The key Colin had given her still warm from her grip. The place didn't smell like medicine, yet just fresh paint, new plaster, and the faint tang of sawdust. She walked along the hallway, passing rooms stripped bare and waiting to be filled, each space echoing with potential. A man in a crewneck sweater and thick glasses looked up from a clipboard near the entrance. "You're Dr. Whitlow," she nodded. "Vanessa, you must be the architect." "Bruno, Colin said you'd come." He gestured toward the main room. "We've been holding off on the layout. Said you'd know what to do better than any blueprint." Vanessa crossed to the steel-framed windows and stared out at the street. Cars coasted by, horns barked in the distance, and the world kept moving. But inside this building, something waited. She turned. "I want intake here. Closest to the door. Exam rooms along the left, and we need a community space, something open, maybe where that wall is." Bruno scribbled fast. "He said you'd rip the whole plan apart." He wasn't wrong. 2 hours later, she was ankle-deep in floor plans and sample swatches when Colin arrived. No suit this time, just a dark sweater and jeans that still probably cost more than her monthly rent. "Didn't think you'd actually use the key," he said. "I wasn't sure I would either," she replied, not looking up. "Then I realized I'd regret it if I didn't." He walked to her side. "So, what do you think?" "It's got bones, good ones, but you're going to need more staff and equipment, and a license for the pharmacy if you want to offer prescriptions on site." "I already started the paperwork," he said, then leaned in slightly. "I wasn't bluffing, Vanessa. I meant it when I said I'd make this happen for you. I'm not asking for favors. And I'm not offering one. You'll run this fully. I'm just the guy paying for the lights to stay on." She met his eyes. "This isn't just about the clinic." "No," he admitted. "It's not." Later that evening, they walked down Avenue A, the wind stiff between the buildings. A jazz trio played on the corner, the singer's voice rasping through a battered microphone as traffic buzzed in the background. Vanessa stopped to watch. Colin stood beside her, hands deep in his pockets. "You ever think about what you'd be doing if life had gone differently?" "I'd probably be in a research lab," she said. "Somewhere quiet, but I like this better. People, chaos, fixing things that shouldn't be fixable." He turned toward her. "You fix people?" "I try." He paused. "My mother used to say the world doesn't need more people who want to win, it needs more people who give a damn." Vanessa glanced over. "She sounds like someone I would have liked." "You would have," Colin said quietly. They kept walking until they reached a narrow alley where a private entrance to an old theater hid behind a rusted gate. Colin pulled out a key card and held the gate open. She narrowed her eyes. "Where are we?" "You'll see." Inside, the room was dark at first, but as the lights slowly rose, a small stage came into view. One table stood at the edge of the orchestra pit, set for two. A bottle of wine glinted in a silver bucket. This used to be her favorite place, Colin said. She loved old musicals. They kept it closed to the public after she passed. I bought the building 2 years ago. You brought me to your mother's theater. I wanted to share something, he said. Something that mattered to me before everything became a negotiation. Vanessa walked slowly to the table and ran her fingers along the edge. You don't invite many people into your world, do you? Not ones who stay. She sat. And you think I will? Colin moved to the table, pulled out the opposite chair. If I'm lucky. Dinner was quiet, not because there was nothing to say, but because the space didn't need noise. They ate by candlelight, the notes of a piano drifting up from hidden speakers. When the final dish was cleared, a dish she couldn't identify but had nearly cried over, Colin leaned forward. I've been thinking about what it means to build something real, he said. Not just walls and rooms, but something that lasts. Vanessa looked at him carefully. Are you talking about the clinic? I'm talking about us. She held his gaze. That's dangerous. I'm not afraid of dangerous. Then you're not paying attention. I am, he said. That's why I want this, because you challenge me. Because when you're in the room, I stop thinking about what I owe people and start thinking about what I want. Silence settled between them. Then Vanessa stood. Colin followed, not saying anything as she walked up the shallow stairs to the stage. She turned slowly under the soft light, looking down at the rows of empty velvet chairs. You ever sing? She asked. Not well. Good, then you'll fit in. He stepped onto the stage beside her. What are we doing? She tilted her head. Making a memory. And without waiting, she stepped closer and kissed him. No hesitation, just the quiet certainty of a woman who knew exactly what she wanted. When they finally pulled apart, Colin rested his forehead against hers. Come home with me, he murmured. Vanessa didn't answer right away, then finally, yes. And the lights in the theater dimmed once more. The morning sunlight spilled through the tall windows of Colin's penthouse, casting golden streaks across the floor to ceiling bookshelves and the deep navy velvet of the sofa where Vanessa sat, barefoot and blinking into her second espresso. The city far below moved in its usual frantic rhythm, but up here, everything felt still. The kind of still that came after something important had shifted. Colin stood by the open kitchen, sleeves rolled up, watching her. I booked the licensing inspection for the clinic. Next Wednesday. Vanessa looked over the rim of her cup. You're not supposed to be the one handling that. I'm not. I just pulled some strings to move it up. She set the cup down and leaned back. You know, I thought I'd feel overwhelmed by all this, but it's weird I don't. I just feel. Ready? He stepped toward her, resting both hands on the back of the couch. That's because you are. She tilted her head, studying him. You sound different today. Different how? Like you let something go. Colin considered her for a moment, then sat beside her, his voice a murmur. I met with the board yesterday, told them I'm stepping back from Dempsey Holdings. Vanessa's brows rose. Wait, stepping back how far? I'll still own it, but I'm done letting it own me. I appointed a new CEO, someone I trust, someone who actually wants that life. I'm keeping the foundation. And the clinic? You're serious, she said carefully. Colin nodded once. I built all those companies thinking I had to prove something, that if I created enough, dominated enough, I could quiet everything I didn't want to face, but none of it ever felt like enough. Until you. She didn't speak right away, but when she did, her voice was steady. I don't want to be someone's escape, Colin. You're not, he said. You're the first real thing I've chosen. Not out of obligation or legacy, but because I want to build something that matters with you. Vanessa looked away, her throat tightening. When I started that late shift, I was barely keeping it together. I was exhausted, drowning in loans, trying to convince myself that survival was the same thing as purpose. She turned back to him, her eyes shining. But then you walked in, bleeding and stubborn and completely unprepared for someone to stitch you up without blinking. Colin smiled softly. You never blinked, Vanessa, not once. I've been afraid to want too much, she admitted. But maybe that's the point. Maybe we're supposed to want more, not just for ourselves, but for something bigger. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope, not velvet, not gold-trimmed. Just cream paper folded neatly. Vanessa frowned. "What's that?" He handed it to her without a word. She opened it slowly, unfolding the card inside. Her eyes scanned the lines and she froze. "Is this?" Colin nodded. "I bought the building next to the clinic. I want to turn it into a residential space for patients who need long-term care but can't afford it. You'll run both, fully, your way." She looked up, stunned. "You're giving me a facility." "I'm building it with you," he corrected. "But the vision, that's yours." She stood abruptly, pacing a few steps before turning back to him. "You don't do anything small, do you?" "No," he said. "But this is the first time it doesn't feel like I'm trying to prove something. I'm just trying to be the man you deserve." Vanessa walked back to him slowly, her feet silent on the stone floor. "You already are." His hand reached for hers, fingers threading together with a quiet kind of certainty. She squeezed once. "Now come get your arm checked." "It's due." "That's how you're celebrating life-changing decisions, with antiseptic and gauze. I'm a doctor. What did you expect? Confetti," he laughed, rising to his feet. "I'd prefer sutures with a side of sarcasm." As she examined the healing scar on his arm, Vanessa's voice softened. "You know, you're lucky. This'll heal clean." Colin looked at her, his voice quiet. "Not the only thing that's healing." A week later, the clinic opened its doors. Patients trickled in, hesitant at first, then more steadily as word spread. Vanessa moved through the halls like she'd lived there for years, confident, calm, commanding respect without demanding it. The staff, many of whom she'd handpicked, moved in sync with her. Colin watched from the second-floor mezzanine, arms crossed loosely, pride written across his face. The official ribbon-cutting ceremony was simple. No press, no speeches. Just the staff, a few community members, and a pair of oversized silver scissors Vanessa pretended not to enjoy using. Later that evening, as the last volunteers filtered out and the sun dipped behind the buildings, Colin took her hands in the empty clinic lobby. "I have one more thing to ask," he said. She gave him a look. "Unless it involves a new wing or a helicopter, I think I can handle it." But he didn't smile, not this time. "In 4 days, there's a benefit dinner for the foundation. It's black tie, formal, uptown. I want you there." "You need me to make a speech?" "No. I want to introduce you to everyone who ever thought I was unreachable. I want them to meet the woman who changed everything." Vanessa's expression shifted, something vulnerable flashing across her face. "You want to bring me into that world? I want to bring our world to them." 4 days later, Vanessa stepped into the ballroom of the Imperial Grand Hotel in a sleek navy gown that hugged her like it had been stitched from midnight. The room went still for a beat, not because of the dress, but because of the man beside her. Colin didn't let go of her hand all evening. Not when the CEO of a hedge fund tried to corner him, not when the former mayor shook his hand. And not when the board chair of the foundation raised an eyebrow at their entwined fingers. As the last speech ended and the orchestra began its final set, Colin led Vanessa onto the dance floor. "You're not exactly a waltz kind of guy," she teased. "I'm full of surprises." As they moved in slow rhythm, he leaned close enough for only her to hear. "I thought I built my empire alone," he said, "but I was just laying the foundation. You're the one who made it real." Vanessa rested her head against his shoulder, her voice almost a whisper. "I didn't expect you to walk into my clinic bleeding and arrogant and completely unprepared," she said. "But I'm glad you did." He pulled her closer. "You saved a lot more than my arm that night." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The music swelled. The chandeliers glittered. And as they turned slowly beneath the lights, Colin pressed his lips to her temple. No crowd, no cameras, no declarations, just two people who had found something real in the most unexpected place of all, and neither of them would ever let it go. The morning of the clinic's first-month anniversary arrived with an unexpected invitation hand-delivered, no less on thick ivory paper edged in midnight blue. Vanessa opened it at her desk, brow furrowed as her eyes skimmed the elegant script. She glanced up at Colin, who was leaning against the doorway of her office with a subtle, unreadable expression. "You could have just told me," she said, holding up the invite. I wanted it to feel different, he replied. Not business, not obligation, just us. She read the last line again. Dinner, the garden at the Dempsey estate. Colin stepped inside, his voice low. I haven't taken anyone there since my father died. Her fingers stilled. You sure you're ready for that? I wouldn't ask if I wasn't. That evening, the car waited downstairs, but this time she had dressed with intention. A floor-length gown in deep emerald, simple and elegant, its back dipped just enough to feel like a secret. Her hair was swept up, a single pin holding it in place. She didn't add jewelry, she didn't need it. When she arrived, the garden was nothing like she expected. Not pristine hedges and marble statues, but wild roses tumbling over wrought iron trellises, lavender bunches lining stone pathways, and strings of warm lights suspended between trees. A long table had been set under a canopy of climbing ivy, the place settings delicate and timeless. Colin waited at the end of the path, wearing a dark suit that made his eyes seem sharper in the fading light. But it wasn't the suit that caught her breath, it was the way he looked at her. Steady, certain. You did all this? She asked, stepping closer. He reached for her hand. With a little help from the gardener and a lot of hope. They sat, and soft music played from a hidden speaker nearby, classical but not stiff. She recognized the melody from the night at the theater. I thought about what you said, Colin began after they'd finished the first course. About not wanting to be someone's escape. Vanessa turned toward him. And I realized, he continued, I don't want to be yours either. I want to be your partner in every sense, not just in this clinic or this dinner, but in everything. She exhaled, her voice steady. You already are. He stood slowly, reaching into his jacket pocket. Then I hope you'll say yes to one more thing. Her heart stilled, but when he knelt on one knee, the box in his hand still closed, her breath caught for real. I bought that building for a clinic, he said. But I didn't know it would bring me to the person who'd change my life. I thought I was giving you something that mattered, but you gave me something I never knew I was missing. He opened the box. Inside, a ring simple but striking. A single diamond set in a platinum band, elegant and unpretentious. I love you, Vanessa Whitlow. I love your fire, your strength, the way you don't flinch at anything, even me. I want to build a life with you that's louder than legacy and stronger than fear. So will you marry me? She didn't hesitate. Yes, she said, her voice breaking just enough to make him smile. He rose and slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into him, their kiss framed by the rustle of wind through leaves and the soft glow of garden lights. There was no need for applause, no audience. Just the two of them finally, fully, forever. They danced after that. No choreography, no planned steps, just swaying in the garden, her cheek against his chest, his arms wrapped around her like he never intended to let go, and he wouldn't. 3 months later, they stood at the front steps of the clinic again, but this time it was for a different announcement. Vanessa addressed the gathered staff and supporters, holding Colin's hand as the media captured the moment. We're expanding, she said. Not just this building, but our mission. We're opening a second location in the Bronx. And this time, we'll have mobile units to reach communities that need us most. Cheers erupted, and Colin pressed a kiss to her temple, whispering, You're changing the world one block at a time, she whispered back, not alone. That evening, they returned to their shared apartment, a sprawling loft above the clinic that they'd renovated together. It wasn't the penthouse, it wasn't gilded or showy, but it was theirs. Colin tossed his jacket over the back of a chair and loosened his tie. Remind me to never let you negotiate with suppliers again. That poor guy looked like he aged 5 years. Vanessa kicked off her heels and flopped onto the couch. He tried to charge us double for the same equipment we bought last month. He's lucky I didn't bring out the charts. Colin laughed and joined her, pulling her legs into his lap. You are ruthless. I'm efficient. He leaned in, brushing her hair back. You're mine. She looked at him, smiling softly. And you're mine. Later that night, as rain tapped softly against the windows and the city hummed below them, they curled beneath the blanket, her head on his shoulder, his fingers tracing gentle patterns on her back. I used to think love happened like a storm, she murmured. Sudden, loud. Unpredictable. And now I know it can be steady, unshakable, like this. Colin kissed the top of her head. You're everything I never thought I deserved. She reached for his hand. But everything you were always meant to have. They fell asleep like that, no walls, no secrets, no distance. Just two people who had found something so rare, so fiercely real that no amount of time or power or past could ever undo it, and they never looked back.